I sat at the back table, farthest from the wedding party. While 200 guests feasted on filet mignon, roasted vegetables, and chocolate mousse, a server placed a single paper plate before me. On it, one piece of dry white bread, no butter, no napkin, nothing else. My mother, Helen, walked past and sneered, "That's all you deserve." My sister, the bride Mallory, in her crystal beaded gown, paused and smirked. Pathetic, as always. The room buzzed with laughter and celebration. My hands trembled, but I knew what came next. I watched the room for 15 more minutes. My younger cousin Chloe, seated 3 tables away, shot me sympathetic glances but said nothing. The best man, Derek, gave a humorous speech about how Tyler, Mallory's new husband, was the luckiest man alive. Everyone laughed. Tyler kissed Mallory dramatically while guests applauded. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. The ballroom at the Riverside Manor was decorated with thousands of white roses. Everything was perfect for everyone else. As I sat there with that dry piece of bread on my paper plate, memories flooded back. I was 12 years old when my grandmother died. She left a trust fund split between Mallory and me. Helen told me the money was gone due to bad investments. But Mallory got a new car at 16. Her college was fully paid. She received a down payment on a condo when she turned 23. I worked 3 jobs through college. I graduated with $60,000 in debt. I spent years wondering why my half disappeared while Mallory seemed to multiply. Growing up, I was always the scapegoat. When Mallory crashed the family car at 17, Helen told relatives I had been driving. I was grounded for 3 months, even though I had been at a debate tournament 200 miles away that day. When Mallory got caught cheating in high school, the principal received an anonymous letter claiming I was the real culprit. I nearly lost my scholarship over it. Family gatherings always featured subtle digs, forgotten invitations, deliberate exclusions. At Christmas, everyone exchanged thoughtful gifts while I received clearance items still bearing price tags, showing they cost less than $10. The breaking point came 6 months ago. I was helping clean out an estate property that had belonged to a distant relative. In a box of old papers, I found bank statements from my grandmother's accounts. They showed the trust fund clearly. My name, my social security number. Deposits made regularly until I turned 21, then nothing. The money had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Wellington. He was a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes. It took him 4 months, but he uncovered everything. Helen had embezzled my entire trust fund, over $150,000. She forged documents, falsified statements, and created a paper trail making it look like the money had been lost in failed investments. But the money never disappeared. It went directly into accounts Helen controlled. That money funded Mallory's lifestyle for 15 years. Marcus found email chains between Helen and Mallory, messages from 3 years ago where they laughed about me. Danette still doesn't know Lowell. She's too trusting. Another message. Maybe we should tell her she got nothing because she's worthless. Followed by crying, laughing emojis. There were text messages discussing ways to exclude me from family events. Plans to make me look incompetent at work by spreading rumors to my employer. Schemes to ensure I stayed poor and dependent while they thrived. I made a decision then. I would attend Mallory's wedding with a flash drive containing every piece of evidence, bank statements showing the embezzlement, emails proving they knew exactly what they were doing, text messages revealing their contempt, photographs of forged documents. I had it professionally edited into a 12-minute video presentation with timestamps and clear voice over narration explaining each piece of evidence. Now, watching the speeches wind down, I stood. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked toward the microphone as the DJ stepped away for a break. Some guests noticed me approaching and whispered to each other. Helen's face tightened with suspicion from her seat at the head table. Her eyes narrowed. She started to stand, but I was already at the microphone. My voice was steady when I spoke. Thank you all for coming tonight. I have something special to share about the beautiful bride and our wonderful mother. I pulled the flash drive from my small purse and plugged it into the laptop connected to the projection system. The large screen, which had been showing a slideshow of Mallory and Tyler's engagement photos, went dark. Then the video began. The first image was a bank statement showing my grandmother's trust fund. My name clearly visible. The balance, $153,000. Then a document showing Helen's signature forging my grandmother's name on transfer paperwork. The voice, over, recorded in my own voice, explained each document calmly and clearly. Text messages appeared on screen. Messages between Helen and Mallory from 3 years ago. Danette still doesn't know lol. She's too trusting. The date stamp visible. Another message. Maybe we should tell her she got nothing because she's worthless. More messages discussing family events I wasn't invited to. Plans to spread rumors about me to potential employers. Jokes about my struggles with student loan debt while they lived comfortably on stolen money. The room went completely silent. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations stopped. 200 guests stared at the screen. I watched faces transform from confusion to shock to horror. Helen stood, her face white as the tablecloths. Her hands shook. Mallory screamed, "Turn it off! Turn it off!" She lunged toward the laptop, but Tyler held her back, his face confused and concerned. The video continued. More evidence. Documented lies about why I wasn't included in the family holiday card photo for 8 consecutive years. Emails discussing ways to make me feel unwelcome at family gatherings. Financial records showing how my trust fund money paid for Mallory's car, her college tuition, her condo down payment, and her elaborate wedding we were currently attending. But then the video showed something else. Something I had debated, including until the last moment. Evidence that Tyler didn't know the truth about Mallory's past. Documents proving Mallory lied about her college degree. She never actually graduated. She had been working with a falsified diploma for 6 years. Her job at the medical supply company, the position Tyler's family was planning to give her in their construction business, all based on credentials she didn't possess. Tyler's face transformed from confusion to horror as he watched. The video finished. Complete silence filled the ballroom. Then chaos erupted. Guests started shouting questions. Some pulled out their phones and started recording. Helen rushed toward me, screaming incoherently. Mallory collapsed into tears, her perfect makeup running down her face. The wedding planner frantically tried to restore order. Bridesmaids surrounded Mallory, trying to comfort her. Tyler stood alone, staring at the screen even though it had gone dark. I stood at the microphone, my heart racing, adrenaline flooding my system. I had done it. I exposed them. Everyone knew the truth. Justice felt sweet. But I didn't realize this was only the beginning of something far worse. The reception hall exploded into disorder. Half the guests were standing, phones out, filming everything. Some relatives rushed to comfort Helen and Mallory. Others approached me demanding explanations, their faces angry and confused. Tyler stormed out of the ballroom without a word. The wedding planner, a stressed woman named Patricia, tried to salvage the evening by suggesting everyone move to the bar area. Nobody moved. Helen, despite her initial shock, recovered quickly. Within 10 minutes, she composed herself. She climbed onto the small stage, took the microphone from the DJ, and addressed the crowd. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was strong and clear. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. "I need everyone to hear me," she said, her voice breaking perfectly. "My daughter Danette has been suffering from mental illness for years. We've tried to get her help. We've paid for therapy. We've supported her through addiction issues and delusional episodes. She's developed a fixation on blaming our family for her own failures. These documents she's shown you are fabrications. She's been obsessed with destroying us out of jealousy, because Mallory is successful in getting married while Danette remains alone and struggling." The crowd murmured. Some faces that had looked sympathetic toward me now looked uncertain. Helen continued, "We love Danette. We've always loved her. But her illness has progressed to the point where she's creating elaborate lies and forging documents to support her delusions. We're heartbroken. We wanted her here today because she's family, but she's used this opportunity to hurt us in the most public way possible." I tried to speak, to defend myself, but a man in a charcoal suit stepped forward. He was tall, probably in his late 50s, with silver hair and an authoritative presence. "My name is Gregory Hartford," he announced. "I'm the family's attorney. I was invited as a guest tonight, but I need to inform everyone that Helen and Mallory will be pursuing criminal charges against Danette for defamation, fraud, and theft of family documents. These allegations are serious. The bank statements shown have been doctored. The text messages are fabricated. We will prove this in court." Several family members immediately backed Helen's story. My Aunt Judith stepped forward, wringing her hands dramatically. "I've always worried about Danette's instability," she announced to the crowd. "There have been concerning incidents for years." Uncle Frank nodded gravely. "I remember strange behavior at Christmas 5 years ago. She seemed disconnected from reality even then. These were complete lies. I hadn't even attended Christmas 5 years ago because they hadn't invited me." Chloe tried to speak up for me. "That's not true," she said loudly. "I've known Danette my whole life. She's never been mentally ill. She's always been the stable one." But Chloe's mother, Aunt Judith, grabbed her arm and told her to be quiet. Chloe looked at me helplessly. Gregory Hartford made a phone call right there in the ballroom. His voice was low, but I heard him say police presence needed and potential criminal harassment. Within 30 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. They were polite but professional. Officer Davis, a woman with kind eyes, asked me to come to the station for questioning regarding allegations of fraud and harassment. They weren't arresting me, she explained, but the family had filed a complaint and they needed my statement. While this unfolded, Mallory and her bridesmaids began posting on social media. I watched it happen in real time as guests checked their phones and showed each other. Mallory's post read, "My mentally ill sister tried to ruin my wedding with fake evidence and cruel lies. Please pray for her recovery and our family's healing. We love her, but we're heartbroken by her actions." The post included a tearful photo of Mallory being comforted by Helen. Within minutes, it had hundreds of shares and thousands of comments. My phone exploded with notifications. Former high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years commented on Mallory's post. I always knew something was off about Danette. She was weird in school, too. Prayers for your family. Some of my co-workers from the marketing firm where I worked saw the posts. They started commenting, expressing shock and concern. I tried to explain that I had the original documents, that the private investigator could verify everything, but Gregory interrupted me, stating that I was now under investigation and should remain silent. He implied that anything I said could worsen my legal situation. He handed me his business card and said, "You should hire an attorney. You're going to need one." By midnight, the wedding had ended in complete disaster. Guests left whispering and recording videos on their phones. Tyler had left hours earlier, his location unknown, but I realized I was completely alone. Chloe apologized quietly but said her parents forbid her from contacting me. Every family member had blocked my number. When I walked out to the parking lot, I found someone had slashed 2 of my car tires. The rubber hung in strips. I sat in my car in the dark parking lot waiting for a tow truck. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Marcus Wellington, my private investigator, but his phone went to voicemail. I tried to access the cloud storage, where I had backed up all the evidence, but I couldn't log in. My password had been changed. The tow truck driver arrived an hour later. While he loaded my car, he made small talk. "Crazy night at this place," he said. "Heard about some woman who ruined her sister's wedding." My stomach dropped. Even strangers knew. "Yeah," he continued. "My wife saw it on Facebook, said the woman was mentally ill or something. Sad situation." I rode in silence back to my apartment. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. Mallory's social media post had gone viral. News outlets were picking it up. Local gossip blogs wrote articles. "Wedding disrupted by sister's mental health crisis." My name was in some of them. My photo, pulled from my own social media, appeared in others. My landlord called at 1 in the morning. His voice was apologetic but firm. "Danette, I've received complaints from other tenants in the building. They saw the social media posts, and they're uncomfortable. I need you to vacate within 30 days. I'll let you out of the lease without penalty, but you need to leave." I tried to call lawyers. I left voicemails for 10 different attorneys that night. Only 3 called me back over the next 2 days. The cheapest wanted a $25,000 retainer just to start. I had $3,200 in my savings account. I couldn't afford any of them. The victory I thought I'd won at the wedding was hollow. I exposed them, yes, but they turned the entire family and social circle against me. They weaponized my truth against me. They transformed my evidence into proof of mental illness. They made me the villain. Worse, I now faced potential criminal charges. Helen had connections I didn't understand yet. She had resources. She had Gregory Hartford, who clearly knew how to manipulate the system. I had nothing. Sitting in my apartment that night, I realized showing the video didn't free me. It trapped me. The frying pan had been hot, the fire was hotter. I barely slept. At 7 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus Wellington, the private investigator. His voice was tense and apologetic. "Danette, I've been contacted by Gregory Hartford. He's threatening me with a lawsuit for participating in what he's calling an illegal investigation and theft of privileged family documents. He says I violated privacy laws, hacked accounts, and conspired with you to create fraudulent evidence. My business could be destroyed. I'm sorry, but I can't testify or help you anymore. I'm returning your money and deleting all files." "But Marcus, you have the original documents," I said desperately. "You can prove everything is real." "I can't," he said quietly. "I have a wife and 2 kids. If Hartford comes after me, I'll lose everything. I'm sorry. I really am." The call ended. I felt panic rising in my chest. I rushed to my laptop and checked my email. My account had been hacked. All the emails containing Marcus's reports were gone. The folders were empty. My cloud storage had been accessed and wiped clean. I still had the flash drive from the wedding, but when I checked it, the files were corrupted. Someone with technical skills had sabotaged it remotely. All my evidence was gone. At 9 that morning, my supervisor called. Janet's voice was cold and professional. "Danette, the company has decided to part ways with you effective immediately. We're citing conduct unbecoming of company values. Several clients saw the social media posts and expressed concerns about having you work on their accounts. Security will escort you out if you come to the office. We'll mail your belongings." "Janet, you don't understand," I tried to explain. "Those posts are lies. My family is trying to silence me because I exposed their fraud. I'm sorry, but the decision is final. Your final paycheck will be deposited Friday." She hung up. By noon, I had lost my primary income source. My savings account had $3,200. My rent was $1,400 per month. Student loan payments were $450. Car payment $300, insurance $120, phone bill $80. I did the math. I had maybe 3 months before I was broke. At 2 in the afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. A process server handed me a thick envelope. I was being served with a lawsuit. Helen and Mallory were suing me for $500,000 in damages. The lawsuit was 50 pages long. It claimed defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with contractual relations. They stated the wedding cost $120,000 and was completely ruined. They claimed severe emotional trauma requiring therapy. They claimed their reputations in the community were destroyed. The legal language was dense and terrifying. I spent the evening researching Gregory Hartford online. He was a partner at Morrison, Hartford, and Associates, one of the region's most prestigious law firms. They represented corporations, wealthy families, and politicians. Then I found something chilling. A photograph from a charity gala 6 months earlier showed Gregory standing beside District Attorney Sharon Pemberton. The caption mentioned they had been friends for 20 years. They served together on the board of a local arts foundation. Helen had chosen her attorney specifically because of this connection. She had access to the district attorney through Gregory. This wasn't just a civil lawsuit. They were building a criminal case, too. The next morning, I received a letter from the district attorney's office. I was officially under investigation for theft, fraud, and computer crimes. They alleged I illegally accessed Helen's financial accounts, stole confidential documents, and fabricated evidence to support false allegations. The letter explained the penalties could include up to 5 years in prison. My landlord called again. "Danette, I need to be honest with you. Other tenants are really uncomfortable. There have been complaints about safety concerns. I need you to vacate within 30 days. I know that's fast, but I can't have this situation in my building." I started calling lawyers again. I reached 10 different attorneys over 3 days. 7 wouldn't take my call after hearing the case details and learning Gregory Hartford was opposing counsel. 3 agreed to consultations. The first wanted a $25,000 retainer. The second wanted $40,000. The third wanted $60,000. When I explained I had $3,000, they all said the same thing. They couldn't help me. I tried to get a public defender, but I was told public defenders only handle criminal cases after charges are formally filed. I wasn't charged yet, just under investigation. I was in legal limbo with no representation and no money to get any. My phone buzzed constantly with hateful messages. Someone created a Facebook group called Justice for Mallory that grew to 3,000 members in 4 days. They shared my address, my former workplace information, and photos of me. Some messages were death threats. "You should die for what you did to your family. Someone should teach you a lesson. I hope you end up homeless where you belong." I reported the worst ones to the platform, but nothing happened. Late that night, sitting in my apartment surrounded by legal documents I could barely understand, I felt utterly defeated. Showing the video didn't free me. It trapped me in a web of legal threats, financial ruin, and social destruction. Helen and Mallory hadn't just survived my exposure. They weaponized it against me with surgical precision. The fire had been hot. Now I was falling into an inferno, and I had no way out. 2 weeks later, I moved into a weekly rental room at the Riverside Motor Lodge. The motel cost $53 per night, $1,590 per month. It was more than my apartment had cost, but there was no lease, no credit check, and no questions asked. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet, with a double bed, a small table, and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. The walls were thin. I could hear everything from the neighboring rooms, but it was all I could afford. I'd applied to 47 jobs in 2 weeks. Not one callback. My name was toxic. Every employer Googled candidates. My name brought up the wedding disaster, Mallory's viral social media posts calling me mentally ill and vindictive, and news articles about the lawsuit. I was unemployable. On day 16 at the motel, I received a text from a number I hadn't seen in 3 years. "Danette, it's Jason. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Can we meet? I want to help." Jason Ryder was my ex-boyfriend. We dated for 2 years before he broke up with me, saying we wanted different things from life. I was surprised to hear from him, but desperate for any ally. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town. Jason looked the same. Brown hair, green eyes, athletic build. He seemed genuinely concerned. "I never believed you were mentally ill," he said. "I always thought your family treated you poorly. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you before." He asked about the lawsuit, the investigation, my current situation. I explained everything, too tired to hold back. Then he made an offer that felt like a lifeline. "I have savings, about $30,000. I want to loan it to you for a lawyer. You can pay me back whenever you're able. No pressure." I felt tears in my eyes. Finally, someone believed me. Someone was willing to help. We talked for over an hour. Jason asked detailed questions about the wedding, about the evidence I had shown, about where I got the documents. I explained how I took photographs of documents from Helen's home office during a visit 2 years ago. I explained how I accessed Helen's email account using a password I found written in an old planner. I told him how Marcus helped me compile everything into the presentation. It felt good to talk to someone who seemed to understand. 3 days later, I received a notice from Gregory Hartford's office. They had obtained a recorded conversation in which I admitted to theft, illegal computer access, and conspiracy. The recording would be used in both the criminal investigation and the civil lawsuit. My heart stopped. I realized Jason had been wearing a wire. I called him immediately. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Finally, he sent a text. "I'm sorry. They offered me $15,000. I have student loans, too. I needed the money." Helen and Mallory had contacted him weeks ago. They knew about our past relationship. They paid him to get close to me again, to record me confessing to how I obtained the evidence. The recording proved I committed crimes. Even though I was exposing their fraud, the way I gathered evidence was illegal. They had me trapped. That same evening, there was a knock on my motel room door. I opened it cautiously and found Tyler standing there. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy. He had dark circles under his eyes. He wore jeans and a wrinkled shirt. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated but let him inside. He sat on the single chair while I sat on the edge of the bed. "The wedding video destroyed my marriage," he said. "Mallory and I separated 4 days after the wedding. I had the marriage annulled 3 weeks ago on grounds of fraud. She lied about her college degree. My family owns a construction business. We were going to give her a management position. That required a business degree she doesn't have. But there's more." Tyler pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. "When I moved out of our condo, I found documents she had hidden. She's been embezzling from her employer for 2 years, a medical supply company. Small amounts at a time. Never enough to trigger immediate audits. But it totals almost $80,000. I have copies of everything. Bank statements showing deposits that don't match her salary. Forged expense reports. Check stubs made out to fake vendors." He handed me the envelope. Inside were dozens of pages of financial documents. My hands shook as I looked through them. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "Because I believe you," Tyler said. "The wedding video, despite ruining my marriage, showed me who Mallory really is. How your family treated you was horrific. I'm disgusted by what I witnessed. I want to help you fight back." I wanted to trust him. But after Jason's betrayal, I was terrified. "How do I know this isn't another setup?" I asked. Tyler looked me in the eyes. "You don't. But I'm giving you these documents with no strings attached. Use them however you want. I'm not asking for anything. I just think you deserve justice." He stood to leave. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. None of this is fair." He walked out. I sat on the motel bed staring at the documents. Were they real? Was Tyler genuinely trying to help? Or was this another trap Helen designed to make me look vindictive and obsessive? I didn't know who to trust anymore. The embezzlement evidence could be powerful, but using it might prove Helen's narrative that I was mentally unstable and fixated on destroying the family. The next morning, I checked my bank account. I was down to $1,300. I'd been at the motel for 18 days. I needed to find cheaper accommodation. I started looking at homeless shelters. My car was repossessed that afternoon. I'd missed 2 payments of $300 each. I couldn't afford it anymore. Now I had no transportation, no job, facing criminal charges and a massive lawsuit, possibly being set up again. Living in a motel I'd soon be unable to afford. Late that night, I sat on the motel bed staring at Tyler's embezzlement documents. I didn't know if they were real or another weapon Helen deployed against me. I didn't know if Tyler was genuine or another paid betrayer. I'd fallen so far that even potential help felt like danger. The inferno had been unbearable. Now I was in the abyss, and I couldn't see any way to climb out. 3 weeks later, I moved into a boarding house on the east side of town. The room cost $220 per week. It was 10 feet by 12 feet, barely larger than the motel room, with a twin bed, a small dresser, and one window that faced a brick wall. The bathroom was shared down the hall with 7 other people. Most were men working construction or driving trucks. It wasn't safe, but it was what I could afford. My savings were down to $400. I visited a community food bank for the first time in my life. Standing in line with elderly people and young mothers with children, I felt the weight of how far I'd fallen. The volunteer, a kind older woman named Ruth, handed me a box containing pasta, canned vegetables, peanut butter, and bread. "God bless you, honey," she said. I thanked her and left quickly, fighting tears. With nothing else to do, I spent 3 days carefully examining every document Tyler had given me. The embezzlement evidence seemed legitimate. Bank statements showing deposits to Mallory's personal account that didn't match her salary, forged expense reports claiming reimbursements for fake business expenses, check stubs made out to vendors that didn't exist. Mallory had been systematically stealing from her employer, probably thinking she'd never get caught. But as I organized the papers chronologically, something else caught my eye. Mixed in with the embezzlement documents was something unrelated, a life insurance payout statement from 10 years ago. It was addressed to Helen, the insured person, Richard Brennan, my father. He died in a car accident when I was 18 years old. The amount made me pause. $800,000. I remembered the funeral, Helen crying dramatically, Mallory being comforted by relatives. I had been numb with grief, barely able to function. But I didn't remember Helen mentioning life insurance. Definitely not a payout that large. I examined the document more carefully. The policy was purchased just 4 months before my father's death. It wasn't a standard life insurance policy. It was an accidental death policy with a triple payout clause. Helen had paid a significant premium for just 4 months, then collected $2.4 million total when Richard died in what police ruled an accidental crash off a mountain road. Something felt wrong. I took 2 buses to the public library to use their computers. I searched for my father's accident report in the public records database. It took 3 hours, but I finally found the police file. Richard's car went off Route 7 near Dead Man's Curve, a dangerous section of mountain highway with a steep drop off. The report stated his blood alcohol level was 0.11, legally drunk, time of accident, approximately 11 at night, no witnesses. The car went off the cliff and was completely destroyed. But I remembered something crucial. My father never drank alcohol. He'd been sober for 15 years after a drunk driving arrest in his 20s. He attended support group meetings every week. Everyone in the family knew he was committed to sobriety. It was impossible he was driving drunk. The police report also noted that Richard's brake lines were severely degraded, contributing to his inability to control the vehicle on the dangerous curve. The report attributed this to age and wear on his 20-year-old vehicle. I needed to verify something. I found the name of the auto repair shop that had serviced my father's car, Delgado's Auto Repair. The shop was still in business. I called and spoke to the owner, a man named Frank Delgado. I explained who I was and asked if he had any service records from 10 years ago. Frank was hesitant at first, but when I mentioned my father's name, his voice softened. Richard Brennan. I remember him. Good man. Always paid on time and treated my staff with respect. Hold on. I heard papers rustling. Yeah, I still have records from back then. I keep everything. What do you need? Do you have records from the weeks before his accident? I asked, my heart pounding. More rustling. Okay, here. Richard brought his car in about 2 weeks before he died. Full inspection and brake service. New brake lines, pads, rotors, the whole system. I even have photos we took for the service record. Everything was in excellent condition when he left here. Why do you ask? The police report said his brake lines were severely degraded, I said quietly. Frank was silent for a moment. That's impossible. I personally installed new brake lines. They were pristine. I have the photographs to prove it. If the police report says they were degraded 2 weeks later, someone tampered with them after he left my shop. I felt sick. Helen had murdered my father. She took out a massive accidental death insurance policy. She tampered with his brake lines. She probably drugged his drink that night to make him appear intoxicated. She planned everything to look like an accident. She collected $2.4 million and no one ever questioned it. I thanked Frank and asked if he would be willing to provide his records if needed. He said yes without hesitation. Richard was a good man. If someone hurt him, I want to help find out the truth. I spent the next 2 days thinking about what to do. This evidence could free me from the current legal troubles. It proved Helen was capable of far worse than embezzlement. It showed she was a murderer. But it also meant confronting a woman who had already killed once and was clearly willing to destroy me to protect herself. I decided I had to try. I called Helen for the first time in 2 months. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was cold. "What do you want, Danette?" "We need to meet in person," I said, "to discuss settling the lawsuit. I'm willing to publicly apologize and admit the wedding video was fabricated. I'll say I was having a mental health crisis. Just drop the criminal charges." Helen was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Come to my house tomorrow evening at 7. We'll discuss terms." She hung up. I borrowed a smartphone from Rosa, a kind woman who lived down the hall in my boarding house. I told her mine was broken. She didn't ask questions. I downloaded a recording app. I planned to record Helen confessing to murdering my father. It was dangerous and possibly illegal, but I was desperate. The next evening, I took 2 buses to Helen's large suburban home, the house my father's life insurance money had paid for. Helen answered the door wearing expensive athletic clothing. Her hair was perfectly styled. She looked successful and unbothered. She led me to the living room and offered water. I refused, not trusting anything she gave me. I pulled out Frank's mechanic records and the insurance documents. I laid them on her coffee table. "I know what you did to Dad," I said quietly. "The insurance policy 4 months before he died. The pristine brake lines 2 weeks before the accident. The blood alcohol level when he'd been sober for 15 years. You murdered him for the insurance money." For just a moment, Helen's composure cracked. Fear flashed across her face. Her hand trembled slightly. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. She picked up the documents and looked at them. Then she laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "Nobody will believe you, Danette. You're already facing criminal charges. You've been publicly branded as mentally ill and obsessed with destroying this family. You think anyone will take you seriously now? You're pathetic." She tossed the documents back on the table. "If you pursue this, I'll make sure you go to prison. Gregory has connections you can't imagine." Then she leaned close and whispered, "Accidents happen, Danette. Your father learned that. Maybe you will too. Now get out of my house." I stood to leave, my legs shaking. Helen blocked the doorway for a moment, staring at me with cold eyes. "You have 1 week to leave the state. Take whatever money you have left and disappear. If you don't, you'll regret it." The threat was clear and terrifying. I pushed past her and walked quickly down the street toward the bus stop. It was dark. Streetlights cast long shadows. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw a man in dark clothing approaching rapidly. He was tall and muscular. His face was partially hidden by a baseball cap. He grabbed my arm hard. "Come with me quietly," he said in a low voice. "Don't make this difficult." He tried to pull me toward a car parked at the curb, a black sedan with tinted windows. Someone was in the driver's seat, engine running. I screamed and fought. I twisted my arm and kicked at him. He was stronger, but I was desperate. I scratched at his face. He swore and tightened his grip. Then headlights appeared. Another car turned onto the street. The man released me suddenly and ran. The black sedan sped away. I was left shaking on the sidewalk. The car that scared them off slowed down. An elderly couple looked out with concern. "Are you okay, dear?" the woman asked. I nodded, unable to speak. They offered to call the police, but I shook my head. What would I tell them? That my mother hired someone to kidnap me? I had no proof. They drove away slowly, watching me in their mirror. I made it to the bus stop and collapsed onto the bench. My arms were bruised where the man grabbed me. Rosa's phone had fallen during the struggle, and the screen was shattered. The recording app hadn't even been running. I'd gotten nothing. Sitting there waiting for the bus, I realized Helen had just tried to have me kidnapped, possibly killed. The abyss had been dark. Now I was in mortal danger. Helen would stop at nothing. I was homeless, penniless, legally trapped, and now physically at risk. I'd never been more terrified. The fire, the inferno, the abyss, all had been survivable, but this might actually kill me. I woke up in a hospital bed, fluorescent lights, white walls, the smell of antiseptic. A nurse entered and explained I'd collapsed at the bus stop from a panic attack. A passerby called 911. I'd been here 6 hours. I had no insurance. The bill would be thousands of dollars I couldn't pay. Then, unexpectedly, Chloe walked into the room. She had tears in her eyes. "Danette, I'm so sorry," she said. "I should have helped you sooner. I've been a coward." Chloe sat beside my bed and explained everything. She'd been secretly gathering evidence for the past month. After the wedding disaster, she hadn't believed Helen's lies about my mental illness. She knew me too well. But she'd been too afraid to speak up publicly. Her parents, Aunt Judith and Uncle Frank, had forbidden her from contacting me. They believed Helen's version. But Chloe worked as a paralegal at a law firm, and she'd been quietly researching. "I found the insurance policy on your father," she said. "I found the suspicious timing. I accessed legal databases through my work and discovered Helen did this before. Her first husband, when she was 23, a man named Douglas Porter. He had a suspicious accident shortly after a large life insurance policy was taken out. He survived, but was permanently disabled. A car crash that the police ruled accidental, but the circumstances were questionable. No investigation was ever conducted because there was no evidence of foul play. Chloe had been in contact with Tyler and Frank Delgado. The three of them had been comparing notes for weeks, gathering evidence, building a case. Tyler had the embezzlement documents proving Mallory's crimes. Frank had the mechanic records proving Richard's car was tampered with. Chloe had the insurance documents and Helen's pattern of suspicious behavior across decades. "We can't go to the police directly," Chloe explained. "Helen has a connection to District Attorney Sharon Pemberton through Gregory Hartford, but we can go to the FBI. Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and murder investigation cross state lines and involve federal concerns. The FBI won't be influenced by Helen's local connections." She explained their plan. Tyler would contact Helen claiming he wanted to make a deal. He'd threatened to go public with evidence of Mallory's embezzlement and the suspicious details of my father's death unless Helen paid him $500,000. It was essentially extortion, which made it legally dangerous for Tyler, but he was willing to risk it. The meeting would be recorded with FBI cooperation. If Helen discussed the murder or offered payment to suppress evidence, they'd have her confession on tape. "I already contacted an FBI agent," Chloe said. "Her name is Susan Carver. She specializes in insurance fraud. I showed her our preliminary evidence. She agreed it warrants a federal investigation. She's willing to wire Tyler for the meeting with Helen." 2 days later, everything was in place. Tyler called Helen and delivered his threat. She hung up initially, but Tyler emailed her copies of the evidence. She called back within an hour. She agreed to meet at Riverside Park, at a pavilion near the lake. She wanted to meet after dark when fewer people would be around. This made everyone nervous, but Agent Carver approved the plan. Tyler arrived at the park pavilion at 8:30 wearing a wire. FBI agents were positioned in unmarked vehicles around the park perimeter. I sat in Agent Carver's command vehicle 2 blocks away with Chloe and Frank, wearing headphones to listen to the conversation in real time. Helen arrived exactly on time. She walked calmly to the pavilion where Tyler waited. She wore dark clothing and had her hair pulled back. Tyler started speaking, clearly nervous. "I have evidence of Mallory's embezzlement and evidence suggesting you murdered Richard Brennan. I want $500,000 to keep quiet. Otherwise, I go to the media." Helen sat on a bench and smiled. "You think you're the first person to try to blackmail me? You're not even close." Her voice was cold and amused. Then she revealed she knew this was a setup. "Gregory had you followed after your annulment from Mallory. We knew you'd been meeting with Danette. We suspected you might be working with her. I also had Chloe's work computer monitored. I knew she was disloyal. I know everything about your little plan." She signaled, and 3 men emerged from the woods surrounding the pavilion. They were large, dressed in dark clothing, clearly hired muscle. "That wire you're wearing won't matter," Helen said calmly, "because you're about to have an accident in this park, a tragic mugging gone wrong. You'll die, and so will Danette, Chloe, and anyone else involved. I've eliminated problems before. You're just another problem." But Helen made a critical mistake. The FBI agents were listening. The moment she threatened Tyler and mentioned eliminating Danette, Agent Carver gave orders. 6 FBI agents converged on the pavilion with weapons drawn and shouting commands. Helen's hired men were apprehended quickly. Helen herself stood slowly, her face finally showing genuine fear. Agent Carver approached Helen directly. "Helen Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted extortion, and pending investigation into the death of Richard Brennan. You have the right to remain silent." She continued reading Helen her rights while other agents handcuffed her. Gregory Hartford arrived within 30 minutes, his face red with anger. But even he couldn't prevent a federal arrest. Helen was taken into FBI custody. Over the next 72 hours, everything accelerated. The FBI executed search warrants on Helen's home. They found extensive evidence, multiple life insurance documents, financial records showing she'd embezzled from 3 different employers over 20 years, and emails discussing ways to handle my investigation. One email to Mallory from 2 weeks ago read, "We need to eliminate the Danette problem permanently. I have contacts." Mallory was also arrested for embezzlement from her employer and conspiracy. The evidence Tyler provided was sufficient for federal charges. The local news covered both arrests extensively. District Attorney Sharon Pemberton, under pressure from the FBI and facing her own investigation for potential interference in justice, dropped all criminal charges against me. Gregory Hartford withdrew the civil lawsuit. Suddenly, after months of legal terror, I was free. The media narrative reversed completely. News outlets that had called me mentally ill now ran stories about my vindication. "Woman proves wedding video was true, mother arrested for murder," read one headline. The Justice for Mallory Facebook group was deleted. I received thousands of messages apologizing for not believing me. Standing outside the FBI field office with Chloe, Tyler, and Frank, I broke down crying for the first time in months. The relief was overwhelming. I'd been validated. My father's death would be investigated properly. Helen would face justice. Mallory would face consequences. Everything I'd fought for was finally real. Agent Carver took me aside privately. "You should know that Gregory Hartford is already working on a plea deal for Helen. Given her age, her lack of violent criminal history on record, and if she's willing to cooperate with other investigations, she may serve minimal prison time. Maybe 10 to 15 years with parole eligibility in 7. My relief dimmed slightly. Helen might still partially escape full justice. The victory was real, but not complete. Still, it was more than I'd dared hope for during the darkest moments. The final battle remained, but I was no longer fighting alone. 6 months later, I sat in my new apartment. It was modest, a 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. The furniture was second-hand but comfortable. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. Plants lined the windowsill, thriving under my care. On the coffee table sat a settlement check from Helen's estate, $187,000. My original trust fund plus interest and additional compensation for damages. I had a new job as a communications specialist at a nonprofit organization called Justice for Fraud Victims. The organization helped people who'd experienced financial exploitation navigate the legal system and access resources. The irony of my position wasn't lost on me. I worked with survivors every day, using my own story to help them find courage. The pay was $42,000 annually. It wasn't lavish, but the work was deeply meaningful. Helen had pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in my father's death, along with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. She received 20 years in federal prison with no parole eligibility for 15 years. She was 63 years old. She'd be 78 before possible release. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was substantial. The judge acknowledged her decades-long pattern of manipulation and violence. Mallory pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. She received 8 years in prison and was ordered to pay restitution of $97,000 to her former employer. Tyler's annulment was finalized. Mallory's professional reputation was destroyed. She lost everything she'd built on stolen money and lies. Some family members reached out with apologies. Chloe became my closest friend, closer than Mallory had ever been. We talked almost every day. Uncle Frank called me crying, apologizing for not believing me at the wedding. He admitted he'd been afraid to stand up to Helen and felt tremendous guilt. I forgave him because I understood fear's power. Aunt Judith sent a card with a brief apology. I accepted it but didn't pursue a relationship. Forgiveness didn't require me to let everyone back into my life. Tyler and I remained close friends. He helped me move into my new apartment, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. He was dating someone new, a teacher named Amanda who knew his full history and accepted it without judgment. Tyler told me repeatedly how grateful he was that the truth emerged before he built an entire life on Mallory's foundation of lies. Frank Delgado, the mechanic, refused payment for his help. "Your dad was a good man," he said. "Doing the right thing isn't something you charge for." I invited him to a memorial service I held for my father. Now that the truth about Richard's death was known, I wanted to honor him properly. Frank spoke about my father's character, his kindness, his sobriety, his dedication to family. It gave me closure I'd never had. Agent Susan Carver became an unexpected mentor. During one of our final meetings, she told me something that stayed with me. "You survived because you refused to accept their version of reality." That's the hardest thing a scapegoat can do. Believe your own truth when everyone tells you you're wrong. You did it. Most people can't. The wedding video, which had seemed like such a disaster, became my salvation. It forced everything into the open. Without that public exposure, Helen might have succeeded in isolating and destroying me completely. The humiliation I felt showing that video transformed into the catalyst for justice. I learned profound lessons through this nightmare. Truth matters, even when revealing it is painful and costly. Sometimes you have to lose everything to gain yourself. The people who stand by you when you have nothing are your real family. Institutions can fail you, but persistence and evidence can overcome corruption. Healing isn't linear. There are still hard days when I wake up anxious, remembering the months of terror. But those days are manageable now. I think about that piece of dry bread at the wedding often. It symbolized years of neglect and cruelty, but it was also the moment I decided I was done accepting less than I deserved. Sometimes the smallest humiliations become the biggest catalysts for change. I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. Hearing others' stories, I recognized patterns I'd experienced. Scapegoat dynamics are tragically common in dysfunctional families. I shared my story and helped others find courage to seek their own truth. Many told me my willingness to fight inspired them. One afternoon, a lawyer contacted me about my father's estate. After Helen's conviction, Richard's assets were reassessed. There was additional money Helen had hidden in offshore accounts, around $60,000. It was awarded to me as Richard's heir. I used it to establish a small scholarship fund for students aging out of foster care, honoring my father's memory by helping vulnerable young people build futures. 18 months after the wedding disaster, I attended a very different wedding. Chloe married her longtime partner Jordan in a small ceremony with 30 guests. I was maid of honor. At the reception, I gave a speech about chosen family, resilience, and love. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The dinner was beautiful. Everyone, including me, received the same carefully prepared meal. No one got just bread. 2 years after everything began, I received a letter from Helen in prison. It wasn't an apology. It was 40 pages of justifications, excuses, and blame. Helen claimed I had forced her hand. She wrote that I ruined the family. She said if I'd just stayed quiet and accepted my place, none of this would have happened. I read it once, then shredded it. I didn't need her apology or acknowledgement. I'd built a life that didn't require either. On the 3rd anniversary of that terrible wedding, I visited my father's grave. I placed fresh flowers and a photograph of myself receiving an award from Justice for Fraud Victims for exceptional service. I told him quietly, "I did it, Dad. I found the truth. I held them accountable. You'd be proud." I believe he would have been. I've learned that justice isn't always swift or complete, but it's worth pursuing. Exposing truth requires courage and often comes at tremendous cost, but it ultimately frees you. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who believe you when the world calls you crazy, the people who stand beside you when you have nothing to offer, the people who celebrate your victories and mourn your losses as their own. Driving home from the cemetery that day, I thought about the 28-year-old woman who got one piece of dry bread at a wedding. That woman was humiliated, powerless, and alone. The woman I am now is none of those things. I'm a survivor. I'm an advocate. I'm a warrior. The bread was bitter, but the victory was sweet. And that's the point. You don't overcome by avoiding the fight. You overcome by walking through the fire and emerging, scarred but stronger, on the other side. Sometimes the cruelest moments in life become our greatest catalysts. Sometimes exposing truth costs everything before it sets you free. Sometimes the family that raised you isn't your real family at all. And sometimes a piece of dry bread becomes the first step toward a feast of justice, healing, and peace. I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family or a relationship? Have you ever felt like no one believed your truth? How did you find the courage to keep fighting when everyone told you that you were wrong? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and overcoming impossible odds. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their truth matters, even when the whole world seems against them. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was long and difficult in places, but I wanted you to understand the whole journey. From that piece of dry bread to standing in my own apartment holding a settlement check and working a job that helps others, the road was brutal, but I made it. And if you're in your own dark place right now, please know this: you can make it too. Hold on to your truth. Gather your evidence. Find your people. Keep fighting. Justice may take time, but it's worth the wait. I wish you strength, courage, and the unshakable knowledge that you deserve so much more than dry bread. You deserve the whole feast. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.